watching Cron On, streaming now from Cron 4, the Bay Area's local news station.
Thanks for joining us here on Cron On. I'm Noelle Bello. Celebrations continue for Maya Angelou as she becomes the first Black woman on a U.S. quarter. Here to talk with us about it is East Bay Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who supported the bill to make it happen. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. How does it feel to be a part of this process to make something like this happen?
Well, thanks so much for giving me a chance to talk about this good news for a change. And this started with the former treasurer, Rosie Rios, who was treasurer under President Obama. And she came to me and we started talking about this idea with regard to the lack of women on currency and especially on our coins. And so we decided, and this took a long time to do, to write legislation, which I led. I wrote the legislation. Of course, this was in about 2017, and we've had 3 or 4 different versions of the legislation, but it was an uphill battle. We had to get bipartisan support, which I finally did. We had to get a Senate author, which I finally did. And so here we are. And I'm just excited because, you know, so many who have contributed to the building of this country in so many ways. The public only sees these guys, the founding and others, and now they'll be able to see women of color. And our first coin is our beloved Dr. Maya Angelou, whose son, actually, Guy, lives in my district, and she's a phenomenal woman. And I had a chance to meet her. She mentored me, got a chance to talk with her. And so I'm very excited that finally now the world is going to begin to not only see the coin and use the coin as it relates to, you know, money and what you do with money, but they're going to be able to learn her story.
Definitely. I mean, it's a beautiful image, too, that was decided to be placed on there in honor of her. What was it about Maya Angelou that put her in the running for this honor? Because she's one of several women that are going to be highlighted on U.S. quarters. Sally Ride, I know, one of them as well. So what was it about Dr. Maya Angelou that made you guys say, okay, she's definitely going to need to be one of the women honored on the quarter?
Well, actually, this was a public endeavor. This involved people submitting names, and we sent the word out early on. The Mint did, and myself and others who were working to make sure this legislation was passed, Rosie Rios. We decided that we wanted it to be a public kind of effort where input from everyone would be considered. Then there, you know, were those in the Mint. I'm not sure if it was a commission or a board, which really did the selection based on the public sentiment and public input, but as well as the stories and who they were in American history.
And her work, I spoke earlier with a local literature professor here in San Francisco just about how much her work has impacted her and the way she teaches her students. Almost, you know, everything comes from this interview that she did with Maya Angelou back in the 80s before she was even, you know, such a household name. Talk to me just a little bit about your experiences with Maya Angelou and how it feels to know that she is one of these women honored on the quarter.
I tell you, everyone really knew Maya Angelou. She was so present in everyone's lives who really understood who she was and what she brought to not only the arts, but just to civic and civil rights engagement, human rights activism. I mean, she was a total woman. And I have to tell you, I had the privilege to be with her several times. She asked me actually to come down to visit her in North Carolina. This was probably right after I voted against the authorization to use force. And she talked to me then and told me how I had to stay my ground and how proud she was of me. And she talked about women, and especially Black women, who have to really stand for what's right and for truth, and to understand that I had a circle of support. And she was one of those supporters. And I'll always remember her beautiful home and her garden. She had a sculpture garden in her backyard. And a couple of things she told me, because I'm a very private person, and we talked for a long time that day. She says, you've got to open up a little bit your personal and private life. She said, Barbara, you can't stay a public person and not share a little bit of those insights about who you are as a person. And we talked a lot about that. And she talked about block parties that she had when she first moved into her neighborhood. And a lot of little stories like that that inspired me and really kept me going. I could always call her when I needed some tough love about moving forward in the work that I do as a Black progressive elected woman. And also, she had a radio show, and she called me and wanted to interview me about my book and a whole host of things. So I had some personal moments, and I was so honored and humbled that the family guy asked me to speak at her memorial at Glide Memorial in San Francisco. So she played a huge role in my life, but more importantly, she played a huge role in the life of this country and the life of the world. She lived in Ghana. She was a global leader. She was a brilliant woman, and she loved children, and she loved our planet in a way that she always says in one of her poems, and still we rise. And in spite of all the challenges that we face in this world, and still we rise.
Well, all of that making her definitely someone to be remembered always, and now to have her, memorialized here on our U.S. quarter is going to be really cool to see them in circulation. I remember, when I was so young and we were collecting the different state quarters, every month they were coming out with the new quarters. So, it's wonderful to see that not only her, like I mentioned, there are several other women that are going to be honored on our U.S. quarters. I know for sure, though, we've been waiting for quite some time. I do want to switch gears here. We've been waiting for quite some time for Harriet Tubman and the $10 bill to happen. I've read before that the Biden administration was going to try and revive that effort. Do you have any insight on that effort?
Sure, and thank you. I believe it's a $20 bill, the Harriet Tubman currency. And in fact, I spoke with the lead sponsor. I was the lead sponsor of this bill in terms of the quarter bill, and Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, myself and others. Joyce is the lead sponsor on that. And we've talked, and we're trying to get the strategy together. Because let me tell you, started in 2017. So it takes a while. But I think now with the Biden administration in office supporting this effort, I think we'll see some progress. But we've had a lot of priorities this last year in terms of legislation, and we know we've got to get the bipartisan support. And this last year, I think you've seen how we're working now, and we're moving forward though, trying to get this done, and hopefully it'll be done very soon.
Because like you mentioned earlier, it really is important to have these women visible on our currency or on things that are passing, hand to hand each and every day. Anything else you'd like to say about these new quarters?
Sure. I think it depicts Dr. Angelou in a magnificent way, and who she was. She soared. She was a beautiful woman, and her spirit soared. And I just think it's important not only that we recognize that this is a historic moment with an African-American woman, a woman of color on a coin, but get to know her, get to know who she was, get to read her I Know Why the Cage Birds Sing, get to read about how when she got to the point where she could not speak for a while. Read her history and the challenges that she went through. And to know Dr. Angelou was to love her. And so I hope our young people will use this coin movement to begin to read about and learn about these phenomenal women and say, yes, I can also, because they had insurmountable challenges that they met and moved beyond. And so Dr. Angelou, I'm so proud of the fact that she's our first woman of color on a coin, our first Black woman on a coin, and hopefully people will get to know her like those of us know her both close and afar in a way that they never did before.
Well, hopefully first of many, that's for sure. Congresswoman Barbara Lee, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure. Nice seeing you.
You too.